Welcome back. We are here today to talk about protists. Protists are one of the kingdoms of life. As you guys recall, you have several different kingdoms that scientists will classify organisms as. So we all are familiar with the plant kingdom. We're all familiar with our animal kingdom. I'm sure that we've all at some point in our lives heard of the fungi, and then our last kingdom in addition to these listed, bacteria. Now you may not know much about bacteria, but I assure you after 8th grade you will be an expert because that is an entire unit in the 8th grade curriculum. So when scientists, biologists are looking at how to classify organisms, they occasionally will come across an organism that does not meet all the qualifications to be classified as a plant. It doesn't meet the qualifications to be classified as an animal, nor a fungi or a bacteria. So the biologist will place the organism or put the organism in this category, Protista, the protists, which is kind of the catch-all group to get the things that don't, or get the organisms that don't fit necessarily in any of the other categories. So moving forward, we classify, in 7th grade science, we're going to look at our protists. Two main things. We're going to determine how our protist moves. So we're going to look at the movement of protist, and we are going to also look at how the protist gains energy. How does it get its nutrition? Is it an autotroph, meaning it creates its own food through the process of photosynthesis, or is it a heterotroph, meaning that it consumes food like we do as humans? Now, in 7th grade science, we have 4 main protists that we like to talk about. I'm going to make that a little bit clearer. Our amoeba. Occasionally you may see this written without the O. Either way, it's still pronounced amoeba. You have the paramecium. We have a euglena. And finally, we have a very curious organism known as the volvox. Now, first we're going to start talking about this funny looking guy, the amoeba. If you notice right here in the central portion of this unicellular, this single-celled organism, we have its nucleus. We have this kind of irregular cell membrane that's holding in all this cytoplasm inside the cell. So, let's first address how the amoeba moves. So the amoeba moves using something we refer or call pseudopods. Now the pseudopods are these things here, as these finger-like structures that are coming off the central portion of the amoeba. The amoeba uses these appendages, these finger-like structures, to reach out and pull itself forward using the cell membrane and using the cytoplasm inside. So this is a very unusual word, but sometimes you will see more commonly referred to as false foot or false feet. That is a little bit easier way, but you will need to know pseudopods. Okay, nutrition, interestingly enough, these pseudopods become part of the nutrition process as well. It is what we call a heterotroph, meaning that it consumes food. It has to eat things in order to survive. So the amoeba will see or detect a piece of food that's kind of hanging out here, and it will actually use these pseudopods to reach out and slowly create a vacuole so that eventually it closes shut and this piece of food becomes as a vacuole inside of the amoeba to be stored for later consumption. Now, moving forward, we have this little guy here known as the paramecium. Now, if you look closely at the paramecium around the cell membrane, you may see these funny little hairs. This is what helps our paramecium get around. These things are called cilia. Ooh, goodness, let me clear that out. Thank you. The cilia. Okay, the cilia are all of these hair-like structure that kind of help propel and wave around in the water to help move the paramecium. Just like the amoeba, so the cilia is for movement. Okay, so that is unique to the paramecium. You will also see with nutrition, it is a heterotroph, meaning that it eats food. Actually, a paramecium has the beginnings of a digestive system. It has a mouth pore and an anal pore to help in the digestion and help in the consumption of food. Okay, so they are heterotrophs. Okay, next we are going to look a little bit more closely at this guy. This is called the euglena. And we've seen this a couple times when talking about cells, this guy, the euglena. Now, if you look in this picture, you will see this structure right here. That is a whip-like tail we call the flagella or flagellum. Okay, so you may see it also written flagellum. It is a tail-like structure that flicks back and forth to propel or to push the euglena forward. Now, what is all this green stuff here in the central portion of the cell hanging out here? Well, folks, you probably guessed it correct. Those are chloroplasts. So the euglena gets its nutrition through photosynthesis. Okay, nutrition, unlike the amoeba and the paramecium, which are heterotrophs, this little guy here is an autotroph, meaning it makes its own food with these chloroplasts and the sun. So euglena, again, a very common protist that you will hear about. Now, lastly, we are going to talk about this interesting character here, Mr. Volvox. Okay, finally, this guy, the Volvox. The Volvox is very unusual in that each one of these is not, or these three spheres are actually not individual Volvox, rather they are colonies of Volvox. Each of these spheres, these circular structures, are shaped like a ball, and they contain up to about 50,000. Now, these do not look that large, but 50,000 individual Volvox protists. The Volvox, again, movement have flagella. So their movement are just like the euglena, except for they have flagella. Nutrition, again, green for a reason, because they are autotrophs and undergo photosynthesis. What's really unusual, like I said, is that the Volvox work together. These individual organisms work together to achieve life, and they are just like a family unit. So again, let's do a quick review. We have talked today about the protists. We have discussed 4 different kinds. The amoeba, we talked about the paramecium, the euglena, and the Volvox. For any upcoming assessments, you should be able to identify these 4 protists, and you should be able to identify how they move and how they eat.